Welcome to Element Hobbies, where we talk about magic, deck boxes, EDH decks, and this video is going to break down just why Hakbal of the Surging Soul is so good, and I'll provide a deck that will hopefully give you a few good ideas of what to put in your very own Hakbal of the Surging Soul deck. Hakbal of the Surging Soul is a legendary Simic Merfolk scout with a mana value of 2 colorless, 1 blue, and 1 green. It's a 3/3, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, each Merfolk creature you control explores. Whenever Hakbal attacks, you can put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield, and if you don't, you draw a card. Hakbal is the face commander for the recent Commander Precon deck Explorers of the Deep, so it's bound to get pretty popular as an Explore commander and a Merfolk commander. Obviously you're going to want to play Merfolk with it, and maybe some landfall type stuff, but the Explore mechanic really gives you some options as far as deck flexibility. The Explore mechanic is as follows. Reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on the exploring creature. Then put that card back on top of your library or put it in your graveyard. Let's break down the ways you can exploit the Explore mechanic. Let's start with the first step of Explore. Reveal the top card of your library. Scrying effects will let you manipulate the top card of your deck. That goes for the actual scry mechanic or the divining mechanic, like Sensi's Divining Top or Elemental Augury. That's where you look at some number of cards on the top of your deck and possibly put some into your hand, and then put the rest back in a particular order. Sylvan Library is also really good at this. These effects will be able to stack the top of your deck to make sure the first couple of explores will hit the way you want. You can also look into cards that let you look at the top card of your deck at any time, and then potentially cast spells or play lands from it like Future Sight. The next part of Explore lets you put lands revealed into your hand. The obvious way to use this is with Land's Edge, though I have no idea how to make that work, given the restrictions of EDH deck building. Hakbal itself gives you an idea of how to best use these extra lands, and that's by playing extra lands on your turns. Cards like Asai Tyrant of Gyre Strait, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and Oracle of Moldiah will all let you get your explored lands into play ahead of schedule. Then we get to the non-land cards. If you get a non-land card on the first Explore from Hakbal, and decide to keep that card on the top of your deck, all your Merfolks are going to get a +1/+1 counter. That opens up two major mechanics, Proliferate and Doubling. Hakbal will get +1/+1 counters on your creatures, that's pretty much guaranteed. Proliferate effects will essentially put more counters on your creatures or anything that already has counters. That means you'll need to get some counters in play before you start the Proliferate party. Doubling effects are things like Hardened Scales and Doubling Season, which is the namesake to which I give this effect. Essentially, whenever something gets a counter, they get an extra counter or counters. There are a lot of these effects getting printed recently, and it might become an issue where the effect becomes so commonplace while still so powerful that we don't realize how much it's usurping other lower power mechanics that just can't keep up, which would be unfortunate, but it's also neither here nor there. For purposes of synergy with Hakbal, doubling works really well. Now we get to the second part of the non-land part of Explore, putting the card back on top of the library or in the graveyard. Getting a non-land card on the first Explore means you can get +1/+1 counters on all your Merfolk, if you keep the card on top. There's not much else you can really do with that except for using a Future Sight ability to cast that spell later in the turn. But where things get really spicy is if you end up putting the card in the graveyard. Unfortunately, Simic can't really take advantage of the graveyard. You'd need to be in a color combination with black to really break it. But you can get a little bit of an edge here and there with effects like Flashback, Retrace, Dredge, and Jumpstart. Of course, to facilitate any of these, we need to have a large base of Merfolk to get these triggers. Luckily, the Explorers of the Deep Precon has a lot of usable Merfolks. In fact, this video will feature many of those Merfolk-based cards. While I wouldn't say this video is one of those Precon upgrade type videos, you can get like 70% of the way to a really powerful deck with the Precon. Keep the core Merfolk, upgrade the mana a bit, and then choose how you want to fill the remainder of the deck to exploit the Explore mechanic in the way you want to. I have a link to this particular Precon as well as the other Precons from Lost Caverns of Ixalan in the description below. The links there are affiliate links, so if you do pick up this or anything else through those links, I'll get a small portion of that sale. For me, I'm still in my big creature and combat phase, so I'm going to be focusing on getting lots of big Merfolk with a good chunk of lords to make the Merfolk even bigger. Then couple that with a few ways to give evasion to all my creatures. I'm also going to be providing some alternatives to help you make finding your own voice when making this deck. When you see this symbol, it means any of the cards here can be replaced with any of the cards in that section for either variety or budgetary reasons. Now, onto the deck. We're going to start with Merfolk based cards because those are the most plentiful in this deck, and having a critical mass of Merfolk is important in a Hakbal strategy. Cupola, Warden of Waves, and Svelun of Sea and Sky both give some wide protection to your Merfolk. Be sure to note that Cupola's ability is not Ward. It requires that the spell targeting your Merfolk costs 2 more mana, whereas Ward counters the spell if they target the Merfolk and then can't pay the Ward cost. If they don't have the extra mana for Cupola, they just never can really actually cast the spell, and it's a take-back type situation. The Cancel Current Conductor works super well with the Explore mechanic, and Tatiova Benthic Druid works really well with Nakanzel. I mean, let's be honest, Tatiova works well with literally almost anything. Merfolk Trickster and Singer of Swift Rivers are flashy merfolks that can be tricksy. The Trickster can prevent an attack by tapping a creature pre-combat, but don't forget that the target also loses all abilities until end of turn. Singer of Swift Rivers will let you protect a creature and let you cast the rest of your merfolk at flash speed. Kumina, Tyrant of Razka, just has a lot of abilities. Remember, you can activate the second and third abilities multiple times the more merfolks you have. Merfolk Skydiver will get you a counter up front, but after you've hackballed counters onto your creatures, the Proliferate can be really powerful. Thrasios, Triton Hero, and Emperor Mihail II will both be powerful value engines, either casting extra merfolk and making extra merfolk tokens, or being one of the best value engines in the entire game. You know, no big deal. Jadelight Spelunker is a flexible mana cost drop, and Deeproot Historian will let you get all your merfolks back from the graveyard. We follow up with the 2 most powerful merfolk in Magic. True Name Nemesis can single-handedly solo a player, especially once Explore counters start getting added to it. Maybe even more powerful is the little-known River Merfolk. I mean, just look at that stud. Goddamn, they don't make them like that anymore. Leave a like on the video if you agree art standards just aren't what they used to be. Now, not every Merfolk card is a Merfolk, including a Realmwalker and Roaming Throne, who are these kind of generic creature-themed pieces, which I generally kind of hate since they're usually so good they usurp pieces in popular themes, when I feel like the idea originally is to support the creature themes who don't get a lot of attention. Here, they'll let you look and cast Merfolk from the top of your deck, and they'll also let you double triggered abilities of your Merfolk. Deeproot Pilgrimage and Deeproot Waters are both enchantments that will create hexproof merfolks for just a very low investment, either by just casting a merfolk or tapping your merfolk. Rounding out the merfolk section is Aquatex Will and Spreading Seas, which will let you give your opponents islands. That's very important for a lot of ambient island walk that your cards have or give. They can also be a quick way to get a card draw if you need. The phrase Lord is synonymous with Merfolk, led by the Lord of Lords, Lord of Atlantis. This is one of the lords that will give all your Merfolk Island Walk, along with Master of the Pearl Trident, who's not quite as good as Lord of Atlantis, but it's still pretty good. Merfolk Mistbinder is a lord for 2 mana as well, but doesn't provide any evasion or anything else for that matter. Still, a 2-drop lord is nice, which is also what Vidalian Hexcatcher is, but with the added bonus of being able to flash it in, and letting you sacrifice Merfolk to potentially counter some spells. It's best used with the previously mentioned enchantments that make those hexproof Merfolk tokens. Merfolk Sovereign and Merrow Regery are 3-drop lords that will give you a bit of tricksiness, either in making something unblockable, and tapping or untapping something when you cast other Merfolks. In fact, Merrow Regery could be viewed as a form of ramp if you like. We round out the lords with 2 non-Merfolks, in Mercfiend Liege and Metallic Mimic. The Liege will do double duty as a lord, giving you up to +2/+2 on all your creatures, but it will also let you constantly untap your creatures on each other player's untap step. Metallic Mimic is another generic creature-themed card, so yawn. And technically it's not a lord since the +1/+1 it provides is in the form of counters, not a static buff, but that does help when we consider the proliferate effects from this deck. Since our primary win condition is to slap our opponents with big fishy boys, we need to make sure that our fishy boys are able to get up close and personal. Herald of Secret Streams and Deep Channel Mentor are pure unblockability for a majority of our creatures, requiring only that they have a +1/+1 counter on them or to be blue. In this deck I think there's only like 3 creatures that don't have blue in them, but it's something to keep in mind when customizing your own Hakbal deck. Zagana Utopian Speaker will give all your creatures with a +1/+1 counter trample, while Sun Quan, Lord of Wu, will give your creatures a basic unblockability unless your opponents are as smart as you and run a Sun Quan too, but they probably don't subscribe to this channel, so they don't get the good stuff like you do, right? I finish up Evasion providers with Wonder and Mistdancer. Mistdancer's a pseudo-lord, but more importantly gives all your merfolk flying. Even a bit more importantly, you can put this card in the graveyard with an Explore trigger, then encore it back for a fatal attack. Same goes for Wonder. Both of these will let you explore a bit deeper with Hakbal. If you need to hit a land, you can just put these into the graveyard and keep your explorations going. You're going to have a lot of card selection with the Explore mechanic, but sometimes you do need a bit more than that. Kindred Discovery is the big hitter here, allowing you to draw a card whenever you cast or attack with a Merfolk. Seafloor Oracle keeps pace pretty well, allowing you to draw a card whenever a Merfolk deals combat damage to a player. Danny Pink will give you a card draw per creature per turn, which can amount to a lot with Hakbal Exploration, and potential proliferates on your opponent's turns. Sage of Fables will remove those counters to draw you cards at a pretty cheap price. Cold Eye Selkie will be a steady supply of cards, growing in scale with the game, and if left unchecked, you'll be drawing more cards than you know what to do with. Now, Life of the Loam is in the last slot, and it's on the bubble. I'm just giving it a try out here. I like that you can explore it away to get started. Time will tell if this stays in the deck. Heroic Intervention and Ripples of Potential are protective interaction that will save all your creatures. Our primary strategy is creature-based, so use these sparingly and only in critical situations. Tishana's Tidebender will stymie and then neutralize a targeted ability, and Mistcaller will slow down players who try to cheat on their mana. Thieving Skydiver is vastly underrated as an artifact deterrent, while Oko, Thief of Crowns, is probably a bit overrated, at least in Commander anyways. But I do have this full art version that I never got to use while it was legal in the other formats, so I'm using it here. Beast Within and Ravenform are 2 single target removal. Ravenform is a bit iffy since it's at sorcery speed, but I'm giving it a shot. I round out the interactions with Mass Diminish and Empress Galena. Mass Diminish is something I'm testing, but I wish it was an instant. But it's still nice to have something like this you can put in the graveyard through Explore effects and still get use later. Empress Galena only permanently gains control of legendary permanents. Nothing insane or completely wild here. I run 5 wipes, starting with Curse of the Swine. This won't wipe the board entirely, and you have to be kind of specific about it. It's not super effective against token strategies, but in general it's pretty solid when you can expect your creatures to be much better than 2/2 boars. The rest are forms of returning things to hands as opposed to destruction or exile, which seems to be the way to go for mass removal in blue. We start with Aetherize, which is more of a defensive wipe, and it won't be super helpful against Pillow Fort style decks or things like Aristocrats, where your opponent doesn't need to attack you to win. Filter Out is a good way to deal with artifacts and enchantments, but not creatures. That should be fine since your creatures should be the best creatures on the board anyways. Wave Goodbye should clear most of the board of creatures except your own. You could be running up against something like a Sovereign Okinnick deck and be screwed, so just make sure to use this carefully. Raise the Palisade is similar, but you will keep your Merfolk in play. You have a much better chance of running up against someone playing with 1/1 counters than Merfolk, but with the rise of Hakbal, those numbers may adjust some. I run a small but peculiar ramp package. The most normal of the bunch are Simic Signet and Talisman of Curiosity. Sea Scryer and Stony Brook Banneret are both Merfolk-based ramp. Once their mana usefulness is done, they'll still have a bunch of counters and lords out to make them threatening. Exploration and Azusa Lost But Seeking will let you play extra lands per turn. If you have one or both of these, you may want to consider prioritizing graveyarding non-land cards when you explore with Hakbal in order to get more lands into your hand. Finally, Elven Chorus will turn all your Merfolk into Birds of Paradise. You'll get the added bonus of casting creatures from the top of your deck and looking at the top of your deck, which will help with your explores. I run 6 utility lands, starting with Path of Ancestry, where the Scry will help out with your exploring, and Karn's Bastion, which works well with the counters from Explore. Mosswort Bridge is going to be pretty easy to pull off after a few explores, and Reliquary Tower is nice when your card draw goes crazy, which it absolutely can in this deck. Lastly, Rogue's Passage is nice to get Hakbal into the combat zone without fear, and Alchemist's Refuge will let you play your Merfolk at instant speed, though at a premium of about 3 mana. I run 12 Simic producing lands. In no particular order are Tropical Island, Breeding Pool, Exotic Orchard, Simic Growth Chamber, Hinterland Harbor, Misty Rainforest, Yavimaya Coast, Command Tower, Waterlogged Grove, Rejuvenating Springs, Flooded Grove, and Dreamroot Cascade. I finish off the deck with 7 forests and 12 islands. As with most creature and combat based decks, the strategy is pretty simple. Early game you'll want to get Merfolk out, feel free to play Hakbal on curve or even a little later. It does its best work when you have Merfolk ready to explore as it comes into play. Try to save your protection. Once you have a few good sized Merfolk and an Evasion giver, you're going to be a pretty big target. Thank you for watching Element Hobbies. Check out a few more videos if you'd like to help the channel. You can like this video, subscribe if you enjoyed, and if you really enjoyed, feel free to join the channel or purchase something through one of my affiliate links, and I will see you around.